So in today's session, we will be covering the mappers available in the Spring Boot or Java provided mappers. Basically, whenever you have dealing with DTOs and the entities, you need to convert DTO to entity and entity to DTO, such that it would be very much needed when you are dealing with Spring Boot based applications. So let me just start with today's session, where we will be working on one of the service like banking demo, and we'll create one REST API, two REST APIs. One is for creating the user and another is for getting all the users. So let me just come to my IntelliJ. So this is the main application. Okay, so here I will be just creating one controller package. Inside this controller, I will be exposing one class, which is user controller. I'll just annotate it as REST controller, and I'll be using some logging also here, and I'll just also add one request mapping, such that this should be my the root path. So I'm just taking an example of IAM, or let's say IAM user service API v1. Okay, users API v1. Okay, let me just move to one of the exposing one of the REST endpoint. So I'll just first create a constructor. It would very much helpful in giving me initialization of some of the beans. So I'll just create a constructor here. Now I'll just create a post mapping. This post mapping would be required for creating the new users. I'll just create a new user, and I'm just adding some dummy data. Okay, now what we are going to do, we are just creating a package, other package, which is named as model. Inside this particular package, I'm creating one other package, which is DTO. This will contain all my DTOs, and I'll just create a class called user DTO, and inside this class we can create a couple of variables. So long user ID, some user private string, user name, email ID, and password I'm just taking as an extra. We'll just see it later. I'll just use SLF4J. I'll just use data for set getters, need no arg, and all our constructors. So I guess another, I need an package called as entity. Inside this, I will be creating one class called user. This would be having same set of variables. I just copy paste, remove this, remove this, and this one. Yeah. So this is our main entity class. This is our user DTO class. Okay. Now, what to basically, I will just create one service package also. This will basically help us creating our actual logic user service. I will annotate it as a service, and now I'll just use SLF4JN also, and to basically store the user, I'll just simply use a list of users. List of users. I just quickly import it. And we will be basically creating the user, create user, and this is basically creating the user and add it to the array list. So we are not integrating any database here right now. I will also create one user to get all or get users. So this will basically responsible for fetching all the users, and I will just return the user normally from here. Now we are basically returning users, a list of users. There is no DTO involved in here, because you have the controller layer and the service layer. In between, all the DDOs will work, and from service to your repository, all the entity class will work. So you need to in between convert the DTOs to your entities. So let me just move to our controller layer, and I'll just also create a get mapping. This will be the /users and public. What I can use here, instead of returning simply object, we can create a response class. So let me just go to here and create a response. So this response will basically contain our actual information, so that all the data would be in same format. No data would be scattered here and there. Now I'll just use one private string your message, private string the status, and I will also use private object and the data, and inside the data we will put our data, and also I will use the timestamp. Okay, so we just move to our controller. Now inside our controller, I'll just returning a response entity which response, and I will also create one response entity response get users, and I'll just log something here, fetching all users. Now we basically need some mapper here, because let's create one user service. Let me make it as a private final. This dot user service, and user service. And if you call user service dot create user, and also whenever we are creating any of the new user, we need to get it in the form of request body. This is my request body, and this would be the user DTO. And now here I convert user DTO to user entity. Okay, but our create user will only take the user as an input. Now we need, and here also we are just calling user service get users. So this is basically giving us a list of all users who are basically registered now. But whenever we return this, okay, whenever we return get users, and this user will contain also the password, but is it recommended that you send all the passwords of the user? No, right? So we will see it later, but let's just move where we need the Mapstruct need. So we clarified that where we need the Mapstruct. Now how we can import it, how we can set it up, the Mapstruct. So there is nothing that needs to be done here. We just need two dependency for the Mapstruct. These are the two dependencies that needs to be added for the Mapstruct. After adding it, you need to just refresh your Gradle. And once you import this, we need to go to the mapper, create a class called user mapper. I think this should be in the model.mappers to make it more meaningful. Move to the correct package. Now this mapper, how we needs to set it up. So there is a annotation known as @mapper. @mapper is the starting point of your mapping of the entity to object, and also you need to provide the component model. There are different component model, but for our need and mostly in the production or anywhere in the enterprise application, you would 90% you will see Spring as a component model, but there are different component models also. You can check here default, and default CDI Spring JSR 330 Jakarta. But for now, for our Spring Bean, to create a Spring Bean, you only need the component model as a Spring, and then you need to write your the user DTO to DTO. Okay, so this basically user. Okay, let me just import it, and this would be the interface. No implementation is there, and public interface user mapper, and we'll just import it, user mapper. So this is your source and this is your target. Your user would be converted into user DTO, and to convert from user DTO to user, we need a user to entity and a user DTO. This is our source and user DTO. These two methods is only needed to basically convert your entity to DTO and DTO to entity. Now let's just move to our controller class. So now we are again in a controller. Now, so user DTO, once again, user DTO to user, and so create user. We also need to create an bean of your mapper. So private final user mapper, comma user mapper, this dot user mapper equals to user mapper. Okay, so we have now created the user mapper here. This is our user mapper bean. Now we need to go to the create user, and now the user service, we need to convert the DTO to the object. So what we will do, user mapper dot to entity and the user DTO. Okay, this will basically give us the user entity object, and this user entity object will be passed to this. And now to return the response entity dot status, HTTP status, so we can use created, and the body would be the response that we have created. So body would be our response. So let me just create a response also. Response equals to new response. So user created successfully. Second one was the message, and the third one was the object. As we are not passing anything in the response, and we also have the date dot to string. Now this is your response. I just collapse it. Okay, so here we basically converted this user detail to entity, then we pass this entity as in to the service class to create the user, then we return the response. Now, for the get mapping, we need to return all the users who are already created in the system. So log.info fetching all the users. We get all the users. Now, what we need to do, we need to convert all the user objects inside the list into the user DTO object. So what we can do instead, we can write a streams users dot stream dot map. Inside map, we can use the user mapper, and we need to convert it into the to DTO. And there is one to list method available, and we'll just extract this. So what we got, list of user DTO. So user DTOs. Okay, now we just need to copy this because fetched or user fetched, we fetch successfully success, and here in the data we can pass the user DTOs. Okay, and we will return the response entity dot status and HTTP status dot okay, and the body would be my response. I don't think this thing we needed, so we can replace it with this and remove this line. And I think we are good. So just to recap, we this is the create user. Create user will give us the user DTO. Now once the user DTO is get, the user service, we need to convert it into the entity so that we can pass it to the user service object, user service method. And once the user is created, we basically prepare our response and send it to the user. And in the get all users, we basically log the user, get the user from the service, which will return the this list of users. And then we basically we converted all the users to the DTO and prepare a list of user DTO and send it to the user. So one thing, I think we are almost done. Now we just need to go to resources and server.port, and let us just start the application. Okay, our application is successfully running on 8080. So let me just get the postman here. I'll just create a new request. I'll name it as get all users, localhost 8080. I am user service API v1 users. Okay, user fetch successfully, so our get API is working fine. There is no data in this particular block because we have not created any of the new user. I'll just create a new API to create the user. Okay, let me just duplicate it. I think something issue is there. Duplicate. Okay, we just make it as post. The API is same. user controller, users and users. Now we go to the body, raw, and what we have, the user ID, which is 1, the email ID. I just take it as rishabh@example or rishabhtech.com, comma, password as a key, and username as Rishabh, not as. Okay. We just send it. Okay, user is basically successfully saved. Data is null because we in the response we have didn't send anything in the create. We just call the create user. Nothing is being returned. Now if I go to get all users and check, okay, so user 1 rishabh.s, email ID and password. This is the basically your timestamp, user fetched successfully. Now I'll just create one more user, create user API. I just delete it, it is not needed longer. So I just create Mohan, password is Mohan. Okay, I just click on send. Again, get all users. If you can see here, user 1, user 2, and one thing that is being basically observed, why this password is getting returned, because whenever user wants to call the create API, then he will definitely forwarding or sending the password. But is it recommended that the password should be, all the user password should be returned in the response as part of the DDO? So we'll see. Another thing that I'm just observing, if any user is returning or giving email ID as empty, so what will happen? Let's just see. So user is basically saved. I just fetch. Okay, email ID is coming as null. But two things that I want here. First, in the DTO, same DTO, password should not be sent to the user in the DTO response. Another thing that I want is the email ID. So if user didn't pass any email ID, if he passed null or empty string, the default email ID like empty or no email ID @rishabhtech.com should be automatically set. So let's just go to our first, removing this password from your response DTO. Let me just again go to our so basically if we go to our user mapper, okay, so here we only use one annotation, nothing else. Now second thing is user is getting converted into DTO and DTO contains your password. So we need to hide that particular thing. So we just need to go to user DTO, and what we can do, we can add one JSON property and access JSON property dot access. So basically dot access, this will basically contains your read only, read write only. But for now we will only use write only. Why? Because user is passing as a password and it should not be ignored when it is basically converted to the entity from your DTO, but it should be when we are accessing it. Okay, when we are reading it, then only we need to remove it from the DTO. So that's why I have added this particular property. So let me just refresh or rerun the program. Okay, application started. Let's just fetch all users. It is empty because we have restarted the application. I have added this particular user. Let's create another user, 2. Then let's just see. Okay, perfect. So now password is not coming. Now our second issue was when the email ID is empty, we need to set some default value when the email ID is null. So there is one extra advanced feature provided by the user mapper. So what you need to do, this needs to be done when you're converting from user to the DTO at the creation of your object. Okay, so there is one annotation which is basically a mapping, and inside this particular mapping our target we need to set. So our target is basically email ID, and it should be same in your basically your DTO, and then we need to add one expression. So in this particular expression, what we will do, we will check that this is our Java expression. Inside our Java expression, we will have the DTO dot get email ID dot, or if it is null, okay, or user DTO dot get email ID dot is empty. If it is empty, then what we need to do, we need to set one default email ID. Okay, so to set default email ID, what we can do, we can add one default email ID which is no email @rishabhtech.com, and no, then colon user DTO dot get email ID. So this is a conditional expression. Okay, so when your user DTO is null or your is empty, then it will set no email @rishabhtech.com, and if basically if it is not empty, then it will definitely place the actual value inside the email ID. So let's refresh it and see. Okay, server is started. So let me just fetch all users are expected to be empty because we have restarted the application. We have pushed one user with email ID, and I'll just use empty email ID and branch send user set. Okay, so you can see here the conditional expression is now executed. So for the first user, I have not set any email ID, and he has basically the mapper has set the default email ID that we have set in the object mapper. Okay, One another thing that is also important and required for an enterprise application, if you have observed here, user DTO, the names are exactly same. User ID, username, email ID and password is exactly same as the user entity class. What will happen if any of the fields are different? Let's take an example. I have my user DTO. So inside user DTO, I have username, and inside the user, we have the username. I'll just change it to the uname and just observe what will happen. Okay, the application is now restarted. Let's refresh. Let's create a user created. Okay, so you can see here, user is not getting mapped. Why? Because the keys are different, the fields are different. So mapper is not that much of intelligent to know that these are the two different keys, and he needs to map it automatically. So in that particular case, what we need to do, we just go to our user mapper, and what we need to do, we need to mapping of your, what is your target is your username, and source is your uname. Okay, the same should be applied over this particular thing, because it should be on the both the side, because DTO to entity and entity to DTO. So okay, so for entity, I guess this should be source, and this is target. Okay, let's just restart. Okay, application is started. Let's run empty expected save, and to email ID type get all users. Okay, now the username is basically coming on all the conditions. I think this is more than sufficient over the your Mapstruct. And Mapstruct, why Mapstruct is used? Mapstruct is very efficient as part of the performance. It basically handles all the things over the compile time, and it is very much preferred over your object mapper. So in production ready application, Mapstruct is widely used and in all the enterprise application. And this is more than sufficient. Like the advanced things is also basically covered. And just stay tuned, and we will be soon starting the Spring Security 7 with Java 25 features, and we will be utilizing MFAs and other Java 25 plus Spring Security 7 features. So I think everything is fine, and I hope you liked the video. Just comment if anything is needed, and we'll catch up soon. Thank you.